Dr. Blake spoke exclusively with CBS News about the growing concern over Iran's nuclear intentions. Now, the big question has long been, how long would it take for them to get to an option of testing a nuclear weapon?
Well, I'm not a technical man, but I heard that the CIA have guessed something like 5 to 10 years. So sometime after 2010, many people think they could have if they went ahead right now.
Let's get something clear. What hard evidence, if any, does the IAEA have that Iran intends to develop a nuclear bomb?
I don't think they have any hard evidence. Some are convinced that, yes, they will, but I think the evidence is circumstantial so far.
It was man overboard or reporter over the side as PJ Master Sergeant Robert Marks and I prepared for our rescue. As we floated clear of the boat, another helicopter was almost immediately upon us with a device called a penetrator dangling from its hoist. Being under a rescue chopper in the water is like swimming into a storm. As Sergeant Mark strapped me into place, the fierce downwash from the helicopter's blades whipped hurricane-force winds about us. But I felt very confident knowing that the pilots and pararescuemen who were pulling me to safety were simply the best in the business. It's not unusual to hear about fights between rival gang factions here in Hempstead. In fact, a lot of times people get hurt who have nothing to do with the gangs. Back in March of this year, there was a machete fight here at this apartment complex on Jerusalem Avenue, during which a young woman got cut up.
She just happened to walk into the middle of it and ended up being assaulted and slashed across the leg with one of the machetes.
What was your experience for you when you first went out into one of these nations? What went through the heart and mind when you saw how people and children were living and what was happening to them, and some of it perpetrated against them by their own people?
Oh, God. So many things. I was in shock for a really long time. I just, I didn't know what to think, and I went to Sierra Leone first, and that was because I'd been following stories about the RUF, and had been cutting off hands and feet, and even little kids, and I met a 2-year-old who had her arms cut off, and I couldn't imagine that people could be so horrible to each other, that life could be so brutal.
Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has asked Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir to remove its obstructions to a 26,000-strong UN and African Union peacekeeping force for Darfur. If Bashir was in this chair and you were having a dialogue, what would you be talking about? What would you be telling him?
Well, that's interesting. I would be asking at this point for him to open up all of the channels possible to allow peacekeepers to come in.
Still to come, hurricane forecasters are running out of names for all these storms. You're watching Boom HD News. I'm Frank Ucciardo. Here are the latest headlines. Rita weakens to a Category 3 hurricane, but is already affecting storm-ravaged New Orleans. 2 neighborhoods there are now being flooded as the city receives wind and rain from Hurricane Rita. Here in the United States, you don't have to look far to find a Palestinian enclave. Here in Paterson, New Jersey, just outside of Manhattan, is a city of about 160,000 people. 17,000 of them are Palestinian, and so is the deputy mayor. Kathleen, Natasha Smalls is back in Far Rockaway, Queens tonight and in good hands. But there now appears to be some serious questions surrounding her disappearance in South Africa and what really happened to her. 8 years after the U.S. detonated its first nuclear bomb, President Dwight Eisenhower addressed the United Nations about the peaceful use of atomic energy as he faced a possible nuclear war with the Soviet Union.
The United States knows that peaceful power from atomic energy is no dream of the future.
Fast forward to Moscow more than half a century later, and it is now the Russians who are negotiating with Iran to head off a global confrontation over Tehran's enrichment of uranium. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov ended a day of high-profile nuclear talks with Iranian envoys on Monday. On the table is Russia's proposal to process uranium for Iran to ensure the fuel was enriched only to a level usable for power stations and not to the higher grade needed for a bomb. Iran warned the world of its ambitions at last year's UN summit on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Iran, for its part, is determined to pursue all legal areas of nuclear technology, including enrichment, exclusively for peaceful purposes.
The right to develop for peaceful purposes nuclear power is the right of all member states of the of the United Nations, but nuclearized Iran is not acceptable. This is, I think, a very serious challenge, and unity of the international community is crucial. The consequences are very serious.
Russian and Iranian envoys will hold a second round of talks Tuesday, but more decisive negotiations will likely take place later this week when Russia's nuclear chief visits Iran.